Uno mas, thanks.
You're Johnny Cage.
I appreciate it.
They should do a reboot.
Nobody wants that.
You have been chosen to fight.
Tell me you're not some crazy fans. Where the hell am I?
It's called Mortal Kombat. To the death.
This is a war to the fate of your world.
I don't catch Frank's overalls. Simply lightning goes
Welcome to Z Cineplex, say your ultimate entertainment destination. Welcome to Z Cineplex, the home of entertainment, creativity, and cinematic excitement. Our channel is dedicated to bringing viewers a rich collection of engaging content that celebrates the world of movies, storytelling, and visual entertainment. Whether you're a passionate film enthusiast, someone who enjoys discovering new cinematic experiences, or simply looking for high-quality entertainment, Z Cineplex is designed to be your go-to destination. We strive to create content that is informative, enjoyable, and engaging for audiences of all ages, offering a unique blend of movie-related features, entertainment updates, insightful discussions, creative videos, and much more. Every upload is crafted with attention to quality, ensuring that our viewers receive an enjoyable experience that keeps them coming back for more. At Z Cineplex, we believe that cinema is more than just watching films. It's about experiencing emotions, exploring stories, appreciating creativity, and connecting with people who share the same passion for entertainment. Our mission is to build a vibrant community where movie lovers and entertainment enthusiasts can discover exciting content, share their opinions, and stay connected with the latest trends in the entertainment industry. We are committed to consistently improving our content, embracing new ideas, and delivering videos that entertain, inform, and inspire our growing audience. Whether you're here for movie highlights, entertainment discussions, reviews, cinematic moments, or fresh creative content, Z Cineplex promises an enjoyable journey filled with excitement, quality, and unforgettable entertainment. Join our community by subscribing, turning on notifications, and becoming part of the Z Cineplex family as we continue to explore the fascinating world of cinema and entertainment together. Thank you for your support, and welcome to Z Cineplex, wherever video brings entertainment to life. Mortal Kombat 2 is a 2026 American martial arts and high fantasy action film based on the long-running Mortal Kombat video game franchise created by Ed Boon and John Tobias, directed by Simon Mcquoid and written by Jeremy Slater. The film is a direct sequel to Mortal Kombat 2021, and serves as the fourth feature film in the Mortal Kombat film series. Building upon the characters, mythology, supernatural abilities, and interdimensional conflict introduced in the previous film, Mortal Kombat 2 substantially expands the cinematic interpretation of the video game universe by bringing several of its most recognizable characters into the story. The sequel places greater emphasis on the wider conflict between Earth Realm and Outworld, the political and supernatural forces controlling the different realms, and the growing threat posed by the powerful Outworld Emperor Shao Kahn. At the same time, the film introduces Johnny Cage as a major new protagonist, while also bringing Katana, Jade, and other important figures from the games into the cinematic storyline. The combination of returning characters, new heroes and villains, elaborate martial arts combat, supernatural powers, fantasy environments, and interdimensional warfare makes the film considerably broader in scope than its predecessor. The film continues the story established in Mortal Kombat 2021, in which Cole Young, a former professional mixed martial artist, discovered that he was part of an ancient bloodline connected to the legendary warrior Hanzo Hasashi, better known as Scorpion. After being drawn into the centuries-old struggle between Earthrealm and Outworld, Cole fought alongside Sonya Blade, Jax Briggs, Liu Kang, Kung Lao, Raiden, and other champions against Shang Tsung and his forces. Mortal Kombat 2 begins from the consequences of that confrontation and follows the surviving Earthrealm warriors as they face a much larger and more dangerous threat. Rather than simply introducing the concept of Mortal Kombat, the sequel expands the story into a broader conflict involving multiple realms, ancient rivalries, powerful rulers, supernatural warriors, and competing political interests. The characters are no longer merely preparing for the possibility of an invasion, they are now directly involved in a struggle that could determine the future of Earthrealm and potentially alter the balance of power throughout the entire Mortal Kombat universe. One of the sequel's most significant developments is the introduction of Johnny Cage, one of the franchise's most iconic characters. Portrayed by Karl Urban, Johnny is presented as a successful but self-absorbed martial arts movie star whose confidence, humor, celebrity status, and combat abilities initially distinguish him from the more serious and battle-focused Earthrealm champions. His introduction adds a different personality dynamic to the group, as Johnny approaches the supernatural world from the perspective of someone who has spent much of his life performing fictional martial arts battles for entertainment. However, his involvement gradually forces him to confront the reality that the violence and extraordinary abilities he once portrayed on screen actually exist. His transition from an entertainer who believes he can control his image to a genuine warrior becomes an important component of the story. Johnny's presence also provides the sequel with a direct connection to one of the most recognizable characters from the video games and allows the filmmakers to incorporate more of the franchise's trademark humor alongside its violent action and fantasy elements. Johnny's recruitment brings him into contact with Sonya Blade and the other Earthrealm champions. Sonya, portrayed again by Jessica McNamee, remains one of the central human fighters and continues to play an important role in protecting Earthrealm from supernatural threats. Her experience from the previous film has made her more aware of the scale of the conflict, while her relationship with the other fighters develops as they become increasingly dependent on one another. Jax Briggs, played by Mcquoid Brooks, continues to fight alongside Sonya and the other champions, while Liu Kang, portrayed by Adeline, assumes an increasingly important position within Earthrealm's defense. Kung Lao, played by Max Huang, also remains an important member of the group. Their individual abilities, personal experiences, and different approaches to combat create a team that must learn to operate together despite their contrasting personalities and backgrounds. Cole Young, played by Louis Tan, continues to serve as one of the central figures connecting the audience to the mythology established in the previous film. His discovery of his connection to Scorpion and his development as a fighter remain important aspects of the sequel, but his role is increasingly integrated into the larger ensemble. Rather than functioning solely as an outsider learning about the Mortal Kombat universe, Cole has become an experienced warrior who understands the dangers facing Earthrealm and recognizes the responsibilities that come with his heritage. His connection to Hanzo Hasashi and Scorpion gives him a particularly personal relationship with the ancient history of the conflict. As the battle grows more dangerous, Cole must balance his own identity and responsibilities with the needs of the larger group, while continuing to develop his abilities and understanding of the supernatural forces surrounding him. Raiden, portrayed by Adeline, remains the principal protector and supernatural guide of Earthrealm. As the Thunder God, Raiden possesses knowledge of the realms and their history that the human fighters lack, making him an essential source of guidance as the conflict expands. However, the increasing power of the enemy means that even Raiden and the other supernatural beings cannot simply resolve the crisis on behalf of humanity. The Earthrealm champions must therefore become increasingly capable of defending themselves and making difficult decisions. Liu Kang's development becomes particularly significant within this structure, as he grows from an accomplished fighter into one of the central champions upon whom the survival of Earthrealm may depend. The film consequently gives greater attention to the responsibilities associated with becoming a true Mortal Kombat warrior rather than simply possessing supernatural abilities. The sequel also expands the mythology surrounding Scorpion and Sub-Zero. Joe Taslim returns as Bi-Han/Sub-Zero, while Hiroyuki Sanada returns as Hanzo Hasashi. Scorpion. The rivalry remains one of the defining relationships within the franchise and represents a conflict that stretches across generations: death, resurrection, vengeance, and supernatural forces. The connection between the two warriors provides the film with a darker and more personal dimension, complementing the larger political struggle involving Earthrealm and Outworld. Scorpion's history as Hanzo Hasashi and his connection to the Shirairu continue to influence the story, while the legacy of Bi-Han and the identity of Sub-Zero remain central to the mythology. Their conflict also reinforces one of the franchise's recurring themes: the way ancient grudges and personal revenge can become intertwined with much larger battles for control of entire realms. Another major expansion comes through the introduction of Katana, portrayed by Adeline Rudolph. Katana is an Indian princess whose history and political position give her a unique understanding of Outworld and its ruling powers. Her presence expands the story beyond the simple division between heroes from Earthrealm and villains from Outworld. Katana is connected to the history of India and the complicated political structure of the realms, making her an important source of information for the Earthrealm fighters. Her opposition to Shao Kahn also places her in direct conflict with the ruler who has exerted enormous influence over her world. Through Katana, the film explores the consequences of conquest and political domination while giving greater depth to the mythology surrounding India and Outworld. Her knowledge, fighting ability, royal background, and personal motivations make her one of the most important additions to the sequel. The greatest threat facing the heroes is Shao Kahn, portrayed by Martin Ford. As the tyrannical emperor of Outworld, Shao Kahn represents a significantly greater danger than the antagonists encountered by the Earthrealm warriors in the first film. His ambition extends beyond defeating individual opponents. He seeks to maintain and expand his control over the realms while eliminating any force capable of challenging his authority. His presence changes the scale of the narrative because the heroes are no longer fighting merely against an individual sorcerer or a collection of invading warriors. Instead, they face a powerful ruler supported by armies, champions, supernatural forces, and an established political order. Shao Kahn's combination of physical strength, authority, intimidation, and ruthless ambition makes him the central figure around whom much of the sequel's conflict revolves. The film's expanded Outworld mythology also allows it to explore the complex relationships between its different characters and factions. Outworld is presented as more than simply a hostile location populated by monsters and warriors. It is a realm shaped by conquest, political power, ancient traditions, rivalries, and the authority of its emperor. The introduction of Katana and other characters connected to India provides additional context for the history of these realms and demonstrates how Shao Kahn's ambitions have affected civilizations beyond Earthrealm. The heroes therefore have to navigate not only physical battles but also shifting alliances and political conflicts. This gives the sequel a broader fantasy adventure dimension and allows the filmmakers to explore the franchise's mythology on a larger scale. Tati Gabrielle portrays Jade, another important character associated with Katana and the wider Indian storyline. Her presence adds another skilled warrior to the expanding cast and strengthens the connection between the heroes and the political world of India. Jade's loyalty, combat abilities, and relationship with Katana contribute to the film's exploration of friendship, duty, and resistance against authoritarian power. The inclusion of characters such as Katana and Jade also demonstrates the filmmaker's intention to draw more heavily from the source material after the first film established the basic cinematic universe. Longtime fans of the games are therefore presented with more recognizable names, relationships, powers, rivalries, and mythology, while newcomers are introduced to these elements through the continuing story of Cole and the Earthrealm champions. The film's action is built around the distinctive combat style associated with the Mortal Kombat franchise: martial arts choreography, hand-to-hand combat, supernatural abilities, weapons, and fantastical powers are combined to create increasingly elaborate confrontations. Each major fighter retains a distinctive combat identity, allowing the action sequences to reflect the different fighting styles and abilities associated with the characters. The sequel also expands the visual representation of supernatural powers and realm-based environments, giving the battles a larger scale than those seen in the first movie. The filmmakers combined practical stunt work, physical sets, visual effects, and choreographed martial arts sequences to create a cinematic interpretation of the exaggerated violence and spectacle that have long been associated with the games. The narrative also continues to develop the themes of identity, legacy, sacrifice, loyalty, and personal responsibility that were established in the first film. Cole's struggle to understand his heritage, Johnny's transformation from celebrity to genuine warrior, Katana's resistance to Shao Kahn, Scorpion's pursuit of vengeance, and the Earthrealm champion's growing sense of responsibility all contribute to the film's broader examination of what it means to become a champion. The characters are repeatedly forced to confront the difference between fighting for personal reasons and fighting for something larger than themselves. Their individual histories and motivations therefore become increasingly connected to the fate of the realms, giving the supernatural conflict and emotional foundation. Development of Mortal Kombat 2 began shortly after the release of the 2021 film. The filmmakers and producers recognized that the first movie had established enough interest in the franchise to justify expanding the cinematic universe. Producer Todd Garner, writer Greg Russo, and director Simon Mcquoid discussed numerous possibilities for continuing the series, including potential standalone projects focused on characters such as Johnny Cage and Bi-Han/Sub-Zero, as well as a direct sequel featuring the surviving characters from the 2021 film. The decision was ultimately made to develop a sequel that would continue Cole Young's story while introducing several of the franchise's most important characters. By 2022, New Line Cinema had officially greenlit the project, with Jeremy Slater selected to write the screenplay and Simon Mcquoid returning to direct. The creative team aimed to preserve the elements that audiences recognized from the first movie while increasing the scale of the mythology, action, character roster, and fantasy world-building. The screenplay was developed with the intention of bringing the cinematic series closer to the larger mythology of the games. Johnny Cage was considered a particularly important addition because of his status as one of the franchise's most recognizable characters and his absence from the 2021 film. The filmmakers also sought to introduce characters such as Katana, Jade, and Shao Kahn while continuing the stories of Scorpion, Sub-Zero, Liu Kang, Sonya, Jax, Raiden, Kung Lao, and Cole Young. This approach allowed the sequel to function simultaneously as a continuation and expansion of the rebooted film universe. Instead of simply repeating the structure of the first film, the sequel was designed to move the story toward a more expansive fantasy saga involving multiple realms, powerful rulers, legendary warriors, and increasingly consequential battles. Principal photography began in Australia in June 2023. Australia again served as an important production location, providing the filmmakers with large spaces suitable for constructing elaborate sets and creating the contrasting environments required for Earthrealm, Outworld, and other locations within the story. Production was temporarily halted in July 2023 because of the SAG-AFTRA strike, which caused delays across the American film industry. Once the strike ended, filming resumed in mid-November 2023 and continued through the following months. Principal photography ultimately concluded in late January 2024. The production required extensive stunt choreography, fight training, visual effects work, prosthetic makeup, costume design, large-scale sets, and technical preparation for the film's numerous action sequences. The filmmakers sought to combine the physicality of traditional martial arts cinema with the exaggerated supernatural spectacle expected from a modern Mortal Kombat adaptation. The sequel also represents a considerable expansion in terms of production design and visual world building. The filmmakers were required to establish environments that could convincingly portray the different realms and cultures of the Mortal Kombat universe while maintaining continuity with the visual style of the 2021 film. Outworld in particular demanded a more elaborate representation because the story spends greater time exploring the realm and its political hierarchy. The costumes and character designs were similarly developed to reflect the distinctive appearances associated with the video games while adapting them for live-action filmmaking. Characters such as Shao Kahn, Katana, Jade, Johnny Cage, Scorpion, and Sub-Zero required designs that could function both visually and practically during large-scale action sequences. Following post-production and visual effects work, Mortal Kombat 2 premiered at the TCL Chinese Theater in Hollywood on April 27, 2026. The film subsequently received its theatrical release in the United States on May 8, 2026. Distributed by Warner Bros. Pictures. Its theatrical campaign emphasized the return of familiar characters, the introduction of Johnny Cage, the appearance of Shao Kahn and Katana, and the larger scale of the action and mythology. The film was positioned as a major continuation of the rebooted franchise and as an opportunity to expand the cinematic universe beyond the relatively contained storyline of the first installment. At the box office, Mortal Kombat 2 earned approximately $129 million worldwide against a reported production budget of $80 million. Although the film generated a significant worldwide theatrical gross, its commercial performance was moderate compared with the largest Hollywood franchise productions. Its financial results reflected the challenge of balancing the expectations of a long-running video game brand with the economics of a modern theatrical release. Nevertheless, the sequel expanded the film series' mythology and delivered a larger collection of recognizable characters and storylines for audiences familiar with the games. Critically, Mortal Kombat 2 received mixed reviews, although its reception was generally more favorable than that of Mortal Kombat 2021. Critics and viewers recognized the sequel's increased ambition, larger mythology, expanded cast, martial arts action, visual spectacle, and incorporation of major video game characters. The introduction of Johnny Cage was particularly significant because the character had long been one of the most recognizable figures in the Mortal Kombat franchise, and Karl Urban's interpretation brought a combination of humor, arrogance, charisma, and action hero energy to the role. At the same time, some criticism was directed toward the screenplay, pacing, narrative complexity, and the balance between character development and large-scale spectacle. Some reviewers considered the film more successful when embracing its video game-inspired action and fantasy elements than when attempting to manage its increasingly complicated mythology. Ultimately, Mortal Kombat 2 represents a substantial expansion of the cinematic universe established by the 2021 reboot. While the first film primarily functioned as an introduction to Cole Young, the Earthrealm champions, their supernatural abilities, and the concept of Mortal Kombat, the sequel moves the series into a much larger fantasy narrative involving Earthrealm, Outworld, Edenia, ancient bloodlines, powerful rulers, supernatural warriors, political rivalries, and interdimensional warfare. The addition of Johnny Cage, Katana, Jade, and Shao Kahn significantly broadens the franchise's character roster, while the continued stories of Cole Young, Sonya Blade, Liu Kang, Kung Lao, Jax Briggs, Raiden, Scorpion, and Sub-Zero maintain continuity with the previous film. With its larger mythology, expanded cast, more elaborate action sequences, and stronger connections to the video game source material, Mortal Kombat 2 functions as both a continuation of the reboot and a major step toward a broader live-action Mortal Kombat saga. The story of Mortal Kombat 2 begins with a historical flashback that establishes the origins of the conflict surrounding Edenia and its eventual absorption into Outworld. Many years before the main events of the film, Emperor Shao Kahn, the ruthless ruler of Outworld, challenges King Ja'ad of Edenia and Mortal Kombat. The battle is not merely a personal confrontation but a struggle for the fate of an entire realm. Shao Kahn ultimately defeats and kills Ja'ad, allowing him to conquer Edenia and incorporate the realm into his expanding Outworld empire. Following his victory, Shao Kahn claims Queen Sindel as his consort and takes Princess Katana as his daughter. effectively placing the royal family under his control. The conquest transforms Edenia from an independent realm into another territory under Shao Kahn's authority and establishes the complicated relationships between Shao Kahn, Sindel, and Kitana that becomes central to the events that follow. Although Kitana grows up within Shao Kahn's court, she remains connected to her true Edenian heritage and eventually becomes increasingly conflicted about the Emperor's rule. 20 years later, the approach of the 10th Mortal Kombat tournament signals another major turning point in the struggle between Earthrealm and Outworld. With the tournament approaching, Shao Kahn begins preparing to secure another victory for Outworld and eliminate the remaining resistance from Earthrealm. He orders the sorcerer Quan Kai to strengthen his forces by reviving warriors who have already died. Among those resurrected are Kung Lao and Kano. Although Quan Kai quickly discovers that Kano cannot be controlled in the same way as the other revived warriors. Kano's inherently selfish and corrupt nature makes him resistant to Quan Kai's attempts to manipulate him, leaving the sorcerer with a dangerous but potentially useful individual whose loyalties are motivated primarily by his own interests. Kung Lao, however, is transformed into a revenant and becomes an instrument of Outworld's forces, setting up a tragic confrontation with his former allies. Meanwhile, in Earthrealm, Lord Raiden and Sonya Blade realize that their existing champions need another fighter if they are to compete effectively against Shao Kahn's increasingly powerful forces. Their search leads them to Johnny Cage, a once famous martial arts actor whose career has declined and whose confidence has been badly damaged by his failures in the entertainment industry. Raiden and Sonya approach Johnny and attempt to convince him that his martial arts abilities can make him a valuable champion for Earthrealm. They explain the seriousness of the coming conflict and the potential consequences if Outworld wins. But Johnny refuses to accept the responsibility. He initially views the situation with disbelief and treats the idea of fighting in a supernatural tournament as something far removed from his life as an actor. His refusal forces the Earthrealm champions to proceed without him, despite recognizing that they desperately need another skilled fighter. The tournament eventually begins, bringing the warriors of Earthrealm and Outworld into direct confrontation. During the opening round, Sonya Blade is matched against Sindel, who has become deeply corrupted under Shao Kahn's influence. The battle is both physically dangerous and emotionally significant because Sindel is not simply another enemy warrior, she is the former queen of Edenia and the mother of Kitana. Sonya nevertheless fights with determination and ultimately defeats Sindel, killing her and eliminating one of Outworld's most dangerous champions. At the same time, Johnny Cage is forcibly transported into the tournament and placed in combat against Kitana. Although Johnny initially has little understanding of the circumstances surrounding him, he is forced to fight for his survival. Kitana defeats him but deliberately refuses to kill him despite Shao Kahn's direct orders. Her decision reveals that she is not completely loyal to the Emperor and that her connection to her true Edenian identity remains stronger than Shao Kahn realizes. After sparing Johnny, Kitana reveals that she has secretly been working as a spy for Raiden. Her apparent loyalty to Shao Kahn has allowed her to gather information from within Outworld, giving Earthrealm a potential advantage against the Emperor. However, Kitana's deception is soon discovered by her bodyguard and trusted warrior Jade, who confronts her over her betrayal. Jade's loyalty to Kitana conflicts with her understanding of duty and her relationship with Shao Kahn, creating an increasingly complicated struggle between friendship and allegiance. Kitana's decision to assist Earthrealm places her in immediate danger and makes her a target of both Shao Kahn and his followers. While the tournament unfolds, Quan Kai pursues another crucial objective. He recovers the stolen amulet of Shinnok, an artifact possessing immense supernatural power. The amulet becomes the centerpiece of a plan designed to give Shao Kahn an overwhelming advantage over his enemies. Quan Kai joins forces with Shang Tsung, another powerful sorcerer and one of Earthrealm's most dangerous adversaries. Their plan takes a decisive step forward when the revenant Kung Lao unexpectedly attacks the Earthrealm forces. Kung Lao manages to wound Raiden, leaving the Thunder God vulnerable. Quan Kai and Shang Tsung then exploit Raiden's weakened condition by drawing his divine power into Shinnok's amulet. They subsequently bind the accumulated power to Shao Kahn, transforming the Emperor into an effectively immortal being. Raiden survives, but the process leaves him severely weakened and unable to intervene directly in the battles that follow. The second round of the tournament brings an especially tragic confrontation between Liu Kang and the resurrected Kung Lao. Liu Kang recognizes that the warrior standing before him is not simply an enemy but his former friend and fellow champion. He attempts to reach Kung Lao and remind him of their shared history, hoping that some part of his old friend remains capable of resisting Quan Kai's control. However, Kung Lao remains trapped within his revenant state and continues attacking. Despite Liu Kang's efforts to redeem him without killing him, the battle reaches a point where Liu Kang has no alternative. He ultimately kills Kung Lao, suffering emotionally from the realization that he is being forced to destroy someone he once considered a brother in arms. The death becomes one of the most painful moments of the tournament and reinforces the brutal consequences of Shao Kahn's supernatural warfare. Elsewhere, Jax Briggs faces Jade in combat. Although Jade is a formidable warrior and has fought alongside Katana for years, Jax manages to defeat her. Rather than killing her, however, he chooses to spare her. Jax explains that he is repaying the mercy Katana previously showed toward Johnny Cage. His decision demonstrates that the Earthrealm fighters are not simply motivated by revenge and that their actions can be influenced by honor, loyalty, and personal debts. Jade's survival also leaves open the possibility that she may eventually reconsider her allegiance and recognize the corruption surrounding Shao Kahn's regime. Cole Young eventually confronts Shao Kahn himself, determined to protect Earthrealm and avenge the fallen warriors. Cole attacks the Emperor and appears to inflict a potentially fatal wound. For a moment, it seems that Cole may have succeeded where others failed. However, the power granted to Shao Kahn through Shinnok's amulet allows him to recover almost instantly. The Emperor's supernatural resilience demonstrates just how overwhelming his new power has become. Cole's attack ultimately proves meaningless, and Shao Kahn kills him. The Emperor then destroys Cole's body with acid, eliminating any immediate possibility of recovery and delivering a devastating blow to the remaining Earthrealm champions. With Cole and Kung Lao dead, Jax facing enormous danger, and Raiden incapacitated, the surviving heroes realize that they cannot defeat Shao Kahn while he possesses the amulet. Liu Kang, Jax, Sonya, and Johnny therefore search for another way to weaken the Emperor. Their investigation leads them to the Tarkatans, a powerful warrior race associated with Outworld. Johnny's confidence remains severely damaged after his earlier defeat by Katana, but his encounter with the Tarkatan leader Baraka provides him with an opportunity to prove himself. Johnny challenges Baraka and manages to defeat him, demonstrating that beneath his arrogance and insecurity he genuinely possesses the skills required to become a warrior. The victory restores his confidence and earns Baraka's respect. Rather than treating the Tarkatans solely as enemies, Johnny's actions allow the group to establish a temporary alliance, and Baraka ultimately guides them toward a hidden entrance beneath Shao Kahn's palace. At the same time, Katana's rebellion becomes increasingly dangerous. Jade captures Katana and delivers her to Shao Kahn. The Emperor chooses to make an example of the princess by having her chained in a public square, exposing her humiliation and betrayal to the people under his rule. Katana's imprisonment becomes symbolic of Shao Kahn's attempt to suppress Adeline resistance and prevent her from becoming a rallying point for those opposed to his rule. Her captivity also increases the urgency of the Earthrealm champions' mission, as they now have to recover the amulet while attempting to rescue one of their most important allies. The Earthrealm fighters infiltrate the area beneath Shao Kahn's palace in an attempt to recover Shinnok's amulet. Their mission quickly becomes a desperate battle when they encounter Shao Kahn and his forces. Jax is killed by Shao Kahn, leaving the surviving champions even more devastated. Liu Kang and Sonya are subsequently captured and taken away for the next round of the tournament. The situation appears almost hopeless. Earthrealm has lost several of its strongest warriors. Raiden remains incapacitated, Cole and Kung Lao are dead, and Shao Kahn possesses the artifact that grants him near invulnerability. An unexpected change in the balance of power comes from Kano, whose selfish motivations lead him to betray Shao Kahn. Although Kano had initially participated in Outworld's plans, he realizes that the luxuries, wealth, and opportunities available in Earthrealm are far more attractive to him than life under Shao Kahn's brutal regime. His decision is therefore not based on heroism but on self-interest. Nevertheless, his betrayal provides Johnny with crucial information. Kano reveals that the amulet is no longer in Shao Kahn's immediate possession and that a resurrected by Han, now transformed into Noob Saibot, has taken it to the Netherrealm. This discovery provides the heroes with one final opportunity to remove Shao Kahn's immortality. Although Raiden has been severely weakened, he still possesses enough power to act. He uses what remains of his divine abilities to send Johnny Cage and Kano into the Netherrealm. Their mission is simple but extremely dangerous. Locate by Han, destroy Shinnok's amulet, and prevent Shao Kahn from retaining his supernatural immortality. Their journey brings Johnny into direct contact with the darker aspects of the Mortal Kombat mythology and forces him to confront an enemy who is fundamentally different from the warriors he has previously fought. The final round of the tournament begins with Shao Kahn facing Liu Kang. Despite his determination and enormous fighting ability, Liu Kang is unable to overcome the Emperor's supernatural power. Shao Kahn fatally wounds him, and Liu Kang realizes that he has misunderstood the prophecy surrounding Earthrealm's champions. He recognizes that he himself is not the chosen one who will ultimately defeat Shao Kahn. Instead of surrendering to despair, Liu Kang accepts his fate and declares that he will rescue the fallen. His body then evaporates into fire, leaving the remaining warriors to continue the fight without him. His apparent death becomes another major emotional turning point and suggests that his role in the conflict may not yet be finished. While Liu Kang is defeated, Sonya manages to escape and reaches Katana. She frees the Adeline princess from her chains, but their escape is interrupted when Shao Kahn attacks. Sonya is knocked unconscious, and Shao Kahn ultimately wins the tournament for Outworld. The victory appears to confirm the Emperor's dominance and leaves Earthrealm facing the prospect of complete destruction or conquest. However, Katana refuses to accept Shao Kahn's authority any longer. She openly denounces him, rejects her imposed allegiance to Outworld, and formally declares her loyalty to Earthrealm. By joining the Earthrealm side, Katana effectively becomes another champion in the struggle against Shao Kahn. Katana then confronts Shao Kahn directly. Their battle is deeply personal because Katana is not simply fighting an enemy ruler, she is confronting the man responsible for destroying her father's kingdom, taking control of her family, and transforming Ednea into part of Outworld. Katana fights with the determination of someone reclaiming both her identity and her homeland. However, she remains unable to permanently defeat Shao Kahn while the Emperor is protected by the power of Shinnok's amulet. Meanwhile, in the Netherrealm, Johnny Cage and Kano join forces with the spirit of Hanzo Hasashi, the warrior known as Scorpion, and with the reformed Jade. Together, they confront the resurrected by Han, now existing as Noob Saibot. The confrontation brings together several major elements of the franchise's mythology: Johnny's newly discovered abilities, Kano's opportunistic alliance, Jade's decision to reject Shao Kahn's influence, and Hanzo's continuing connection to the supernatural world. Their combined efforts ultimately allowed them to destroy Shinnok's amulet. During the confrontation, Johnny's own supernatural powers are unlocked, marking the culmination of his transformation from a reluctant celebrity into a genuine Mortal Kombat champion. The destruction of the amulet immediately changes the balance of power. Shao Kahn loses the supernatural protection that had made him effectively immortal, transforming him from an almost unstoppable force into a mortal opponent. As his invulnerability disappears, Katana gains the opportunity to defeat him. She confronts the Emperor and ultimately kills him, ending his reign and bringing his control over Ednea to an end. Shao Kahn's death represents both a military victory and a personal liberation for Katana. With the tyrant eliminated, Ednea is finally freed from Outworld's domination, and Katana assumes her rightful position as its queen. Her ascension symbolizes the restoration of the kingdom and the beginning of a new political era following decades of conquest. The destruction of the amulet also restores Raiden's lost power. When Shang Tsung attempts to take advantage of Raiden's weakened state and kill him, the situation suddenly reverses. The destruction of the artifact releases the power that had been trapped within it, allowing Raiden to recover his full strength. With his divine abilities restored, Raiden effortlessly defeats Shang Tsung, eliminating one of the principal architects of the plot against Earthrealm. The defeat of Shang Tsung further confirms that the heroes have finally broken the supernatural advantage that had allowed Outworld's forces to dominate the tournament. The story concludes after the major conflict has ended with the surviving heroes gathering once again. Johnny Cage, Sonya Blade, Raiden, Katana, Jade, and Baraka reunite, representing the unlikely alliance that has emerged from the events of the tournament. Kano also returns to the group, having captured Quan Kai. Despite his repeated betrayals and selfish motivations, Kano has become useful to the surviving champions because Quan Kai possesses knowledge and supernatural abilities that may provide a way to reverse some of the devastation caused during the tournament. With several of their strongest allies dead or apparently lost, including Cole Young, Kung Lao, Jax Briggs, and Liu Kang, the group develops a new plan: use Quan Kai's powers to revive the fallen champions. The ending therefore provides both a sense of victory and a clear continuation of the larger Mortal Kombat saga. Shao Kahn has been defeated, Ednia has been liberated, Raiden has regained his powers, Katana has become queen, and several former enemies have joined forces with Earthrealm. However, the deaths and supernatural transformations that occurred during the tournament have left the heroes with a new challenge. The plan to revive the fallen warriors suggests that the consequences of the battle are not permanent and that characters who appeared to have died may potentially return. At the same time, the survival of Quan Kai and the continuing existence of the Netherrealm leave open the possibility of further supernatural conflicts. The conclusion thus transforms the film's apparent victory into the beginning of another chapter, with the surviving champions preparing to restore their fallen allies and defend the realms against whatever new threat may emerge. The cast of Mortal Kombat 2 combines the principal returning performers from Mortal Kombat 2021, with several prominent new additions, bringing a substantially larger selection of characters from the Mortal Kombat video game franchise into the live-action film series. Karl Urban stars as Johnny Cage, one of the franchise's most recognizable characters and a major new protagonist in the sequel. Cage is portrayed as a successful but increasingly frustrated martial arts actor whose confidence has been damaged by the decline of his career. His journey in the film takes him from a reluctant and self-centered celebrity to a genuine champion of Earthrealm, forcing him to confront the reality of the supernatural conflict that he previously regarded as impossible. Urban's performance combines Cage's characteristic arrogance, humor, charisma, physicality, and gradually developing sense of responsibility. Urban portrays a younger version of Johnny Cage, appearing in flashback material that provides additional context for the character's background and early life. Adeline Rudolph portrays Katana, the Adeline princess whose history is deeply connected to the central conflict of the film. Katana is the daughter of King Ja'ad and Queen Sindel but was raised under the control of Shao Kahn after he conquered Ednia and killed her father. Her complicated relationship with Shao Kahn, her loyalty to her true homeland, and her growing opposition to his rule make her one of the film's most important characters. Katana secretly assists Raiden and Earthrealm while maintaining the appearance of loyalty to Shao Kahn, eventually openly rejecting the Emperor and fighting to liberate Ednia. Sophia Zhu portrays young Katana in the film's flashback sequences, depicting the character during the period surrounding Shao Kahn's conquest of Ednia and her forced incorporation into his royal court. Jessica McNamee returns as Sonya Blade, one of Earthrealm's most experienced human warriors and a central member of the resistance against Outworld. Sonya continues to combine military discipline, determination, and combat expertise as she prepares for the 10th Mortal Kombat tournament. Her experience gives her an important leadership role among the Earthrealm champions, and she remains deeply involved in recruiting Johnny Cage and coordinating the group's efforts against Shao Kahn. Throughout the film, Sonya participates in several major battles, including her confrontation with Queen Sindel, and remains committed to protecting Earthrealm even as the conflict results in the deaths of several of her allies. Josh Lawson reprises his role as Kano, the ruthless and opportunistic mercenary whose selfish personality makes him one of the most unpredictable characters in the film. After being resurrected by Quan Kai, Kano initially becomes involved with Outworld's forces but proves difficult to control because of his already corrupt and independent nature. His loyalty ultimately depends on his personal interests rather than any genuine commitment to either Earthrealm or Outworld. When Kano realizes that the privileges and wealth available in Earthrealm are preferable to serving Shao Kahn, he betrays the Emperor and provides Johnny Cage with crucial information about the location of Shinnok's amulet. Although Kano remains morally questionable, his decision becomes essential to the hero's eventual victory. Adeline returns as Liu Kang, one of Earth's most powerful martial artists and one of the principal champions chosen to defend Earthrealm. Liu Kang continues to demonstrate exceptional combat ability while struggling with increasing responsibility placed upon him. His emotional connection to Kung Lao becomes especially important when the latter is resurrected as a revenant and forced to fight against his former allies. Liu Kang attempts to save his friend rather than simply defeat him, but ultimately has to kill Kung Lao when he is unable to break Quan Kai's control. Later, Liu Kang confronts Shao Kahn in the final stage of the tournament and is fatally wounded, leading him to realize that he was not the chosen warrior he had believed himself to be. His final declaration that he will rescue the fallen leaves his ultimate fate open to further development. Mcquoid Brooks reprises his role as Jax Briggs, Sonya's longtime ally and one of Earthrealm's strongest human fighters. Jax continues to serve as an important member of the Earthrealm team, combining his military experience with his enhanced physical abilities. During the tournament, he fights Jade and defeats her but chooses to spare her, partly as repayment for Katana previously showing mercy toward Johnny Cage. Jax later confronts Shao Kahn while attempting to recover Shinnok's amulet, but the Emperor overwhelms him and kills him. His death becomes one of the major losses suffered by Earthrealm during the tournament and demonstrates the enormous power Shao Kahn possesses while protected by the amulet. Tati Gabrielle portrays Jade, a highly skilled warrior and longtime protector of Katana. Jade initially remains loyal to Shao Kahn and confronts Katana after discovering that the princess has secretly been assisting Raiden. Her conflict with Katana is complicated by their personal history and friendship. Jade later fights Jax, who defeats her but chooses not to kill her. This act of mercy contributes to Jade's eventual change of allegiance, and she ultimately joins the heroes in the battle against Bi-Han in the Netherrealm. Her transformation from an agent of Shao Kahn into an ally of Earthrealm reinforces the film's themes of loyalty, betrayal, redemption, and the rejection of tyranny. Louis Tan returns as Cole Young, the central protagonist introduced in the 2021 film. Cole remains deeply connected to the supernatural history of the Mortal Kombat conflict through his bloodline and his connection to Hanzo Hasashi and Scorpion. Having already discovered his abilities and accepted his responsibility as an Earthrealm champion, Cole enters the new tournament as a more experienced warrior. His confrontation with Shao Kahn becomes one of the film's most consequential battles. Cole manages to inflict what appears to be a mortal wound on the Emperor, but Shao Kahn's supernatural immortality allows him to recover instantly. Shao Kahn subsequently kills Cole and destroys his body with acid, making Cole one of the major casualties of the tournament. Max Huang returns as Kung Lao, the skilled Earthrealm warrior whose fate becomes one of the film's most tragic developments. After being revived by Quan Kai, Kung Lao returns as a revenant under the sorcerer's influence. His resurrection turns him against the very people with whom he once fought, creating a heartbreaking confrontation with Liu Kang. Although Liu Kang attempts to reach his former friend and restore his humanity, Kung Lao remains under Quan Kai's control. Liu Kang ultimately has no choice but to kill him, making Kung Lao's death a major emotional turning point for the Earthrealm champions. Damon Harriman portrays Quan Kai, the powerful Netherrealm sorcerer responsible for manipulating several of the film's major events. Working under Shao Kahn's orders, Quan Kai resurrects Kung Lao and Kano and attempts to use them for Outworld's advantage. He almost retrieves Shinnok's amulet and works alongside Shang Tsung to transfer Raiden's power into the artifact before using it to make Shao Kahn immortal. Quan Kai's schemes place him among the principal architects of the crisis. Despite the defeat of Shao Kahn, Quan Kai survives and is eventually captured by Kano, who brings him back to the surviving heroes. The characters then consider using Quan Kai's supernatural abilities to revive their fallen allies. Shin Han reprises his role as Shang Tsung, the powerful sorcerer who remains one of Earthrealm's most dangerous enemies. Shang Tsung collaborates with Quan Kai to manipulate Raiden's power and strengthen Shao Kahn through Shinnok's amulet. His actions contribute directly to the Emperor's temporary immortality and the near destruction of the Earthrealm champions. After the amulet is destroyed, Shang Tsung attempts to kill the weakened Raiden, but the destruction of the artifact restores Raiden's powers. Raiden then defeats Shang Tsung with relative ease, ending his immediate threat. Adeline returns as Lord Raiden, the Thunder God and protector of Earthrealm. Raiden remains responsible for guiding the human champions and preparing them for the coming Mortal Kombat tournament. However, his power becomes a major target of Quan Kai and Shang Tsung. After Kung Lao wounds him, the two sorcerers drain his power into Shinnok's amulet and leave him severely weakened. Despite this setback, Raiden continues to provide guidance and eventually uses his remaining strength to send Johnny Cage and Kano into the Netherrealm. Once the amulet is destroyed, the power taken from him is restored, allowing Raiden to defeat Shang Tsung and reclaim his role as Earth's supernatural protector. Joe Taslim portrays Bai Han, who returns in his transformed identity as Noob Saibot. Having already been associated with the Sub-Zero identity, Bai Han's resurrection takes him further into the supernatural mythology of the franchise. As Noob Saibot, he becomes a dangerous servant of the forces opposing Earthrealm and obtains Shinnok's amulet, taking it into the Netherrealm. His confrontation with Johnny Cage, Kano, Hanzo Hasashi, and Jade becomes one of the film's climactic battles. The destruction of the amulet during this confrontation removes the supernatural protection that has made Shao Kahn nearly impossible to defeat. Hiroyuki Sanada returns as Hanzo Hasashi, the legendary warrior known as Scorpion. Although his role is closely connected to the supernatural mythology surrounding death and resurrection, Hanzo continues to influence the events of the film even beyond his physical presence. His spirit becomes involved in the battle against Bai Han/Noob Saibot, joining Johnny Cage, Kano, and Jade in their attempt to destroy Shinnok's amulet. Hanzo's continuing conflict with Bai Han represents one of the oldest and most personal rivalries in the Mortal Kombat mythology and gives the climax a strong connection to the franchise's history. Desmond Chiam portrays King Jaot, the former ruler of Edenia and the biological father of Katana. Jaot appears in the film's historical flashback, where he confronts Shao Kahn in Mortal Kombat while attempting to defend his kingdom. Shao Kahn defeats and kills him, allowing Outworld to conquer Edenia. Jaot's death becomes the foundation of Katana's personal hatred of Shao Kahn and her determination to restore Edenia's independence. Although his role is primarily connected to the film's backstory, his legacy has a major influence on Katana's decisions throughout the main narrative. Anna Thurston Nguyen portrays Queen Sindel, Katana's mother and the former queen of Edenia. Sindel appears in the flashback surrounding Shao Kahn's conquest and is later shown as a corrupted champion serving the emperor. Her transformation demonstrates the extent of Shao Kahn's control over Edenia's royal family. Sindel eventually faces Sonya Blade during the tournament and is defeated and killed. Her fate further motivates Katana to reject Shao Kahn and reclaim her identity as an Edenian princess and eventual queen. C.J. Bloomfield portrays Baraka, the fearsome leader of the Tarkatans. Baraka initially represents another formidable force within Outworld, but his confrontation with Johnny Cage leads to an unexpected shift in the story. Johnny defeats Baraka in combat, but instead of treating the victory as an opportunity to humiliate or kill him, he earns Baraka's respect. Baraka subsequently helps Johnny, Sonya, Liu Kang, and Jax by guiding them toward a secret entrance beneath Shao Kahn's palace. His later alliance with the surviving heroes demonstrates how the struggle against Shao Kahn can unite characters who were previously considered enemies. Martin Ford portrays Shao Kahn, the principal antagonist and emperor of Outworld. Shao Kahn is responsible for conquering Edenia, killing King Jaot, controlling Sindel and Katana, and attempting to establish complete dominance over the realms. His immense physical strength and supernatural power make him the most formidable opponent faced by the Earthrealm champions. After Quan Kai and Shang Tsung use Shinnok's amulet to transfer Raiden's power to him, Shao Kahn becomes effectively immortal. This allows him to survive Cole Young's attack and defeat several of the Earthrealm champions, including Cole and Jax. However, that destruction of the amulet removes his supernatural protection, allowing Kitana to defeat and kill him and ultimately reclaim Midnia. The film also contains two notable appearances by Ed Boon, the co-creator of the Mortal Kombat video game series. Boon makes a cameo as a bartender at the bar frequented by Johnny Cage, providing a playful connection between the original creator of the game and the cinematic adaptation. His second appearance comes through archival audio featuring Scorpion's famous "Get Over Here" line during the film's climax. Of the two appearances, Boon's physical bartender cameo is the one for which he receives an on-screen acting credit, while the archival audio functions as an additional Easter egg for longtime fans of the franchise. These appearances reinforce the film's connection to the original video games and serve as small but recognizable tributes to the creative origins of Mortal Kombat. Here is a more detailed, polished, chronological, and comprehensive version of the development section, written entirely in paragraph form and incorporating the major creative decisions and progression of the project. Development of Mortal Kombat 2 began almost immediately after the release of Mortal Kombat in April 2021, with the filmmakers and cast discussing the possibility of continuing the rebooted franchise. Actor Joe Taslim, who portrayed by Han/Sub-Zero in the first film, revealed shortly after the movie's release that his contract included options for 4 additional Mortal Kombat films if Warner Bros. Pictures chose to develop the franchise further. The contractual arrangement indicated that the studio and filmmakers had considered the possibility of building a longer-running cinematic series rather than treating the 2021 film as a standalone project. Although the continuation of the franchise was dependent on the studio's decision and the performance of the first film, Taslim's comments demonstrated that plans for additional installments had been considered from an early stage. Director Simon Mcquoid likewise expressed interest in returning for another film, but emphasized that he would only do so if the sequel had a sufficiently strong story and a meaningful reason to continue the characters' journeys. Following the first film's release, Mcquoid discussed several possibilities for expanding the rebooted universe. One of the most significant decisions concerned the absence of Johnny Cage, one of the most recognizable characters in the Mortal Kombat franchise. Mcquoid explained that Johnny Cage had deliberately been left out of the first movie because the character possesses such a large and distinctive personality that introducing him alongside the extensive ensemble could have disrupted the balance of the story. The filmmakers instead chose to establish the basic mythology and introduce the new protagonist Cole Young before bringing Cage into the narrative. Mcquoid suggested that a sequel would provide a more appropriate opportunity to introduce Johnny Cage once the audience was already familiar with the world, its rules, and the principal Earthrealm champions. He also identified Kitana as another character who could be explored in future installments and expressed an interest in expanding the presence and importance of female characters within the franchise. The filmmakers also began considering the larger structure of the rebooted series. Co-writer Greg Russo explained that he had envisioned the new continuity as a potential trilogy, with each film occupying a different stage of the Mortal Kombat storyline. In his proposed structure, the first film would take place primarily before the actual tournament and would focus on establishing the characters, their abilities, and the mythology of the realms. The second film would take place during the tournament itself, allowing the story to explore the full-scale conflict between Earthrealm and Outworld. A potential third installment would then take place after the tournament and explore the consequences of the battles and the changing balance of power between the realms. Although this broader trilogy concept was not necessarily a guarantee that 3 films would be produced, it provided the filmmakers with a possible long-term framework for expanding the rebooted universe. By November 2021, producer Todd Garner publicly hinted through social media that development on a sequel was progressing. His comments generated renewed speculation about the future of the franchise and indicated that Warner Brothers and the producers were seriously considering a continuation. In January 2022, the sequel was officially confirmed to be in development, with Jeremy Slater hired to write the screenplay. Slater's appointment marked an important stage in the project's development because the sequel required a screenplay capable of expanding the mythology while also incorporating characters and concepts that had been intentionally reserved for future installments. His work would ultimately focus on continuing the story established in the first film while increasing the scale of the franchise and bringing more elements from the video games into the live-action continuity. One of the earliest confirmed creative priorities for the sequel was the introduction of Johnny Cage. In May 2022, Slater confirmed that Cage would appear in the film, following the first movie's deliberate setup for the character. Although the first film had established that Johnny Cage existed within its world without actually showing him, the sequel offered an opportunity to make him an active participant in the story. Slater explained that the precise role Cage would play was still being determined at that stage, but his inclusion was considered an important part of the sequel's development. Because Cage is one of the most recognizable and personality-driven characters in the franchise, his addition required the filmmakers to carefully determine how his humor, celebrity persona, martial arts abilities, and relationships with the other characters would fit within the more serious supernatural conflict established in the reboot. Slater also emphasized that the sequel would embrace more of the unusual and eccentric qualities traditionally associated with Mortal Kombat. He indicated that the filmmakers did not want the second movie to simply repeat the approach of its predecessor. Instead, they intended to explore some of the franchise's stranger concepts and supernatural mythology while maintaining a coherent cinematic story. Slater expressed a desire for the sequel to be unpredictable and to avoid following every expectation established by fans. This approach reflected an effort to balance two competing objectives: honoring the source material and its established fan base while also allowing the filmmakers to surprise audiences with new interpretations of familiar characters and situations. The intention was to create a sequel that could appeal to longtime players of the games without requiring the audience to know every detail of the franchise's extensive mythology. In June 2022, Slater further discussed the development process and explained that the filmmakers were paying attention to both the positive and negative reactions to Mortal Kombat. 2021, the first film had generated enthusiasm among many fans for its action, characters, fatalities, and references to the games, but it had also received criticism concerning aspects of its storytelling, character development, pacing, and adaptation choices. Rather than simply reproducing the formula of the first film, the creative team intended to learn from those reactions when developing the sequel. The goal was to preserve the qualities audiences responded positively to while addressing weaknesses identified by viewers and critics. This feedback-driven approach became an important part of shaping the screenplay and determining which characters, storylines, and elements of the mythology would receive greater attention. The development process also reflected a broader effort to expand the roster of female characters and strengthen their roles within the franchise. Mcquoid had previously expressed interest in including more women in the series, and the sequel's planned introduction of characters such as Katana and Jade provided an opportunity to accomplish this. The filmmakers wanted the female characters to have meaningful positions within the story rather than functioning solely as supporting figures. Katana in particular offered the opportunity to introduce the history of Edenia, its royal family, and its relationship with Outworld, while Jade could serve as both a formidable warrior and an important part of Katana's personal storyline. These additions helped expand the political and emotional dimensions of the Mortal Kombat universe. By July 2022, the sequel reached another major milestone when New Line Cinema officially greenlit the project, confirming that the film would move forward as a full production. At the same time, Mcquoid was announced as returning to direct. His return provided continuity with the 2021 film and allowed the sequel to maintain the visual and stylistic foundation established by the original reboot. Mcquoid's involvement was particularly significant because he had previously emphasized that he wanted a strong narrative justification for returning to the franchise. His decision to come back indicated that the creative direction being developed for the sequel met those requirements and offered sufficient opportunities to expand the world and characters. With the project officially approved, the filmmakers could move forward with a larger and more ambitious vision for the rebooted Mortal Kombat universe. The development of the sequel centered on expanding the story beyond Cole Young's introduction and bringing the franchise closer to its broader video game mythology. Johnny Cage became a central addition, while Katana, Jade, Shao Kahn, and other major characters were considered as part of the expanded narrative. The sequel was conceived as a film that could explore the Mortal Kombat tournament more directly while also examining the political relationships between Earthrealm, Outworld, and other realms. The filmmakers aimed to increase the scale of the action and fantasy elements while maintaining the character-driven approach that had established the foundation of the 2021 film. Ultimately, the development of Mortal Kombat 2 evolved from early discussions about a possible continuation into a formally approved sequel designed to expand the rebooted cinematic universe. The period following the first film's release allowed the filmmakers to evaluate audience reactions, consider long-term franchise possibilities, identify characters who had been intentionally reserved for later stories, and establish a larger narrative direction. Joe Taslim's comments about his multi-film contract, Mcquoid's willingness to return under the right creative circumstances, Russo's early trilogy concept, Todd Garner's hints about development, Jeremy Slater's appointment as screenwriter, and the eventual greenlighting of the project by New Line Cinema all contributed to the sequel's progression. By the time Mcquoid officially returned to direct, the project had developed onto a significantly larger continuation intended to deepen the mythology, introduce major fan-favorite characters, embrace more of the franchise's distinctive weirdness and fantasy, respond to criticism of the first installment, and establish a stronger foundation for the future of the Mortal Kombat film series. Casting for Mortal Kombat 2 began taking shape in early 2023 as the filmmakers prepared to expand the rebooted Mortal Kombat universe with the significantly larger ensemble of returning and newly introduced characters. One of the most important casting priorities was finding an actor capable of portraying Johnny Cage, a character who had been deliberately omitted from Mortal Kombat 2021, because of his particularly large personality and importance within the franchise. At the same time, the filmmakers sought performers for Katana and Jade, two major characters whose introduction would allow the sequel to explore the history of Enya, its royal family, and its relationship with Outworld. The casting process therefore represented an important stage in the sequel's expansion, as the filmmakers needed actors who could embody characters already familiar to longtime fans while also fitting naturally into the live-action continuity established by the first film. In May 2023, Tati Gabrielle entered final negotiations to portray Jade, while Karl Urban was simultaneously reported to be in final negotiations for the highly anticipated role of Johnny Cage. Urban's potential casting generated particular interest because Cage is one of the most recognizable and personality-driven characters in the Mortal Kombat games. The role required an actor capable of combining action hero physicality with comedy, arrogance, charisma, and the character's exaggerated Hollywood persona. Urban's experience with action-oriented roles and ensemble franchises made him a prominent choice for the part, and his eventual casting positioned Johnny Cage as one of the sequel's principal new characters. Gabrielle, meanwhile, was considered for Jade, a skilled warrior and close associate of Katana whose loyalty and relationship with the Adeline princess are important to the story. During the same period, it was reported that Jessica McNamee and Josh Lawson would return from the 2021 film as Sonya Blade and Kano, respectively. Their return helped preserve continuity between the two movies and ensured that several of the most recognizable characters from the reboot would remain central to the developing story. McNamee's Sonya continues to function as one of Earthrealm's principal warriors and leaders, while Lawson's Connor remains an unpredictable and morally ambiguous figure whose motivations are driven largely by personal gain. Their contrasting personalities provide the sequel with both dramatic continuity and opportunities for humor and conflict within the expanded ensemble. Later in May 2023, Adeline Rudolph joined the cast as Katana, marking one of the sequel's most important new additions. Rudolph had previously worked with Tati Gabrielle on the Netflix television series Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, making their casting particularly notable because the two performers would once again share the screen, this time as characters whose relationship is central to the story. Rudolph's casting completed the principal pairing of Katana and Jade and gave the sequel the opportunity to explore their friendship, loyalty, and eventual conflict over Katana's opposition to Shao Kahn. Katana's introduction also allowed the filmmakers to expand the mythology surrounding Edenia and to introduce the royal history that had been largely absent from the 2021 film. Gabrielle's casting as Jade was confirmed alongside Rudolph's addition to the ensemble. Jade is portrayed as a highly trained warrior and protector whose allegiance initially lies with Katana and Shao Kahn's regime. Her complicated relationship with Katana provides one of the sequel's more significant character conflicts, as she must eventually decide whether to remain loyal to the Empire or recognize the injustice of Shao Kahn's rule. Gabrielle's casting therefore served not only to introduce another major fighter from the games but also to strengthen the film's female ensemble, an area that director Mcquoid had previously expressed interest in expanding. In June 2023, the cast was expanded further with the addition of Martin Ford as Shao Kahn, Desmond Chiam as King Jeot, Anna Thursday Nguyen as Queen Sindel, and Damon Harriman as Guan Kai. Ford's casting as Shao Kahn was particularly significant because the character is one of the most physically imposing and powerful antagonists in the Mortal Kombat mythology. The role required a performer capable of conveying the Emperor's enormous physical presence and intimidating authority, and Ford's background as a professional bodybuilder and imposing screen presence made him well suited to the character's visual requirements. Shao Kahn serves as the principal antagonist of the sequel, making Ford's performance an important part of the film's expanded conflict. Desmond Chiam was cast as King Jeot, the former ruler of Edenia and Katana's biological father. His role is primarily connected to the film's historical material, which depicts Shao Kahn's conquest of Edenia and the events that led to the destruction of Jeot's kingdom. Although Jeot's appearance is largely associated with the film's backstory, his character is essential to understanding Katana's motivations and her opposition to Shao Kahn. His death at the hands of the Emperor becomes the historical event that defines much of Katana's relationship with Outworld and motivates her eventual determination to reclaim Edenia. Anna Thursday Nguyen was cast as Queen Sindel, Katana's mother and the former queen of Edenia. Sindel's role connects the historical flashbacks with the main tournament storyline, as she is shown both as part of Edenia's royal family and as a corrupted warrior operating under Shao Kahn's authority. Her character represents another example of the Emperor's ability to dominate the conquered royal family and use its members as instruments of his power. Nguyen's casting therefore contributed to the film's effort to establish a more detailed history for Katana and Edenia while expanding the mythology beyond the Earth realm-focused narrative of the first installment. Damon Harriman was announced as Guan Kai, one of the most important supernatural antagonists in the Mortal Kombat universe. Harriman had previously appeared in the 2021 film in a different capacity, having provided the voice of Karl. His return in a new role represented a significant change from his previous involvement in the franchise. As Guan Kai, Harriman portrays a manipulative and powerful sorcerer whose actions help drive the central conflict of the sequel. Guan Kai is responsible for reviving characters such as Kung Lao and Kano, recovering Shinnok's amulet, and working with Shang Tsung to enhance Shao Kahn's power. His involvement therefore places him at the center of the supernatural conspiracy against Earthrealm. Later in June 2023, Max Huang confirmed that he would return as Kung Lao, continuing his role from Mortal Kombat 2021. Huang's return was particularly important because Kung Lao had become one of the recognizable Earthrealm champions in the rebooted continuity. His character's storyline in the sequel takes a darker direction, as Kung Lao is resurrected and transformed into a revenant under Quan Kai's influence. His eventual confrontation with Liu Kang provides one of the film's most emotionally significant sequences, allowing Huang and Adeline to revisit the close relationship established between their characters in the first film while placing them on opposite sides of the conflict. The sequel's returning cast also includes several performers whose characters form the foundation of the Earthrealm storyline. Adeline returns as Liu Kang, Mcquoid Brooks as Jax Briggs, Louis Tan as Cole Young, Tadanobu Asano as Lord Graydon, Joe Taslim as By-Hand/Noob Saibot, and Hiroyuki Sanada as Hanzo Hasashi, Scorpion. Their continued participation provides narrative continuity and allows the sequel to develop the character arcs established in the first film. At the same time, the addition of Urban, Rudolph, Gabrielle, Ford, Kiem, Nguyen, and Harriman considerably broadens the ensemble and introduces a greater number of characters directly adapted from the video games. The casting of Karl Urban as Johnny Cage ultimately became one of the most prominent aspects of the sequel's production. Cage had been intentionally saved for the second film, allowing the filmmakers to avoid overcrowding the first movie while creating anticipation for one of the franchise's most popular characters. Urban's interpretation combines Cage's flamboyant celebrity personality with the physical requirements of a martial arts action role. His involvement also gives the sequel a different comedic and tonal dynamic, particularly when Cage interacts with the more serious Earthrealm warriors. His character's journey from a reluctant actor to an active fighter provides an important emotional and comedic thread throughout the story. Approximately 1 month before the film's release in April 2026, another significant casting-related announcement revealed that Ed Boon, co-creator of the Mortal Kombat video game franchise, would make an appearance in the film. Boon's involvement provided an especially direct connection between the movie and the original games on which it is based. His cameo was designed as an Easter egg for longtime fans and demonstrated the filmmakers' willingness to acknowledge the franchise's origins. Boon appears as a bartender at the establishment frequented by Johnny Cage, allowing him to share a brief scene within the fictional world of the film while also serving as a recognizable presence for audiences familiar with the history of Mortal Kombat. The casting process for Mortal Kombat 2 ultimately resulted in a considerably larger and more diverse ensemble than the first film. The combination of returning performers and new additions allowed the sequel to preserve continuity while substantially expanding the fictional universe. The return of McNamee, Lawson, Lin, Brooks, Tan, Huang, Asano, Taslim, and Sanada maintained the connection to the 2021 reboot, while the arrival of Urban as Johnny Cage, Rudolph as Katana, Gabrielle as Jade, Ford as Shao Kahn, Kiem as King Jaot, Nguyen as Sindel, and Harriman as Quan Kai brought several major elements of the video game mythology into the live-action series. With the additional cameo by Ed Boon and the introduction of younger versions of Johnny Cage and Katana for flashback sequences, the casting reflected the sequel's larger ambitions and its effort to explore both the present-day tournament and the historical events that shaped the relationships between Ednia, Outworld, and Earthrealm. Filming for Mortal Kombat 2 began in Australia during the middle of 2023, with the production once again using the country's extensive studio facilities and locations to create the expanded world of the Mortal Kombat universe. Principal photography officially commenced on June 22, 2023, at Village Roadshow Studios in Gold Coast, Queensland, which had previously served as an important production base for large-scale film and television projects. The decision to return to Australia allowed the filmmakers to maintain continuity with the visual and production approach of Mortal Kombat 2021, while providing the space and infrastructure necessary for the sequel's considerably larger collection of action sequences, fantasy environments, elaborate sets, and visual effects work. The production was directed by Mcquoid, with Stephen F. Windon serving as cinematographer. Windon's work was particularly important to the sequel because the film required a visual approach capable of balancing grounded martial arts combat with the supernatural and fantastical elements of the Mortal Kombat mythology. The cinematography was designed to support the film's expanded scale while preserving the physical intensity associated with the franchise. The filmmakers relied on carefully choreographed stunt work, practical sets, controlled studio environments, visual effects, and extensive fight choreography to create the various battles between Earthrealm and Outworld. The production also required the creation of environments associated with different realms and cultures, including Earthrealm, Outworld, Idnia, and the Netherrealm. Because the story expands beyond the relatively contained locations of the first film, the production design and cinematography had to accommodate the wider range of visual environments, from ancient royal settings and enormous palace interiors to darker supernatural locations and large-scale tournament arenas. The visual language of the sequel therefore needed to distinguish the different realms while maintaining an overall stylistic connection to the 2021 film. The production placed particular emphasis on the physicality of the action. The Mortal Kombat franchise is strongly associated with martial arts combat, exaggerated physical abilities, distinctive weapons, supernatural powers, and highly stylized confrontations, requiring the cast and stunt teams to undertake extensive preparation. The larger ensemble also meant that numerous actors had to participate in complex fight sequences involving multiple performers, stunt doubles, practical effects, and visual effects enhancements. Characters such as Johnny Cage, Katana, Jade, Shao Kahn, Scorpion, Noob Saibot, Liu Kang, Sonya Blade, Jax, Kung Lao, and Cold Young all required distinctive combat styles and physical performances that reflected their identities within the franchise. The filmmakers therefore designed the action sequences around a combination of martial arts choreography and cinematic spectacle, allowing the fights to remain physically grounded while incorporating the supernatural abilities expected from the source material. However, production encountered a major interruption during the summer of 2023 because of the SAG-AFTRA strike. Filming was suspended in July 2023, only a short time after principal photography had begun. The strike affected numerous Hollywood productions and prevented many actors from continuing work on projects covered by the union's labor action. As a result, Mortal Kombat 2 became one of the productions whose schedule had to be temporarily halted. The interruption required the filmmakers and production team to pause planned scenes and reorganize the shooting schedule while waiting for the labor dispute to be resolved. Although the stoppage delayed the production timeline, the project remained active and was prepared to resume once the strike ended. After the SAG-AFTRA strike concluded, production on Mortal Kombat 2 resumed in November 2023. The return to filming allowed Mcquoid, Windon, the cast, stunt performers, and the wider production team to continue the remaining sequences and complete the extensive work required for the sequel. The resumed production involved additional principal photography covering character-driven scenes, large-scale confrontations, action sequences, and material involving the film's expanded cast. The filmmakers also continued working on sequences involving the film's major new characters, particularly Johnny Cage, Katana, Jade, and Shao Kahn, whose storylines significantly broadened the sequel's narrative and visual scope. The production's return in November also allowed the filmmakers to complete sequences that required extensive coordination between actors and stunt teams. The sequel contains numerous battles involving multiple characters, which demanded careful scheduling and choreography. Fight scenes had to be designed not only around the abilities of individual characters but also around the story's emotional stakes. The production consequently placed significant emphasis on making the action understandable while maintaining the heightened brutality and supernatural spectacle associated with Mortal Kombat. Practical stunt performances were supplemented by visual effects where necessary to portray magical attacks, supernatural transformations, enhanced abilities, and the more fantastical aspects of the story. Australia remained the principal production base throughout the filming period, with Village Roadshow Studios providing the controlled studio environment needed for complex interior sequences and effects-heavy scenes. The Gold Coast location also offered access to experienced crews, sound stages, technical facilities, and production infrastructure capable of supporting a large Hollywood action film. The use of studio environments was particularly valuable for scenes involving outworld and the supernatural realms, where sets could be constructed and modified specifically for the production rather than relying entirely on existing locations. This approach also gave the cinematography team greater control over lighting, camera movement, stunt safety, and visual effects integration. As filming progressed into early 2024, the production entered its final phase of principal photography. The filmmakers completed remaining scenes involving the ensemble cast and finalized the major action material needed for the finished film. Because the sequel features numerous interconnected storylines, the final stages of production required careful attention to continuity between scenes filmed before and after the strike. The production team also had to ensure that character appearances, costumes, sets, fight choreography, props, and visual effects remained consistent despite the extended shooting schedule. These considerations were particularly important for sequences that involved extensive post-production work or required visual continuity between practical footage and computer-generated elements. Principal photography officially concluded in late January 2024. Marking the completion of the main production phase. The wrap brought an end to a filming process that had begun in June 2023, being temporarily interrupted by the SAG-AFTRA strike in July, and resumed in November before continuing into the following January. The completed footage then moved into the extensive post-production stage, where the filmmakers could begin assembling the final narrative, refining the action sequences, completing visual effects, editing the numerous character storylines, and shaping the film's overall pacing and tone. The filming process ultimately provided the foundation for the sequel's expanded cinematic scale, with the Australian production combining large studio environments, practical action, martial arts choreography, elaborate production design, and visual effects work to bring the increasingly complex Mortal Kombat mythology to the screen. Mortal Kombat 2 received its world premiere at the TCL Chinese Theater in Hollywood, Los Angeles, on April 27, 2026, marking the beginning of its theatrical rollout and providing the filmmakers, cast, and franchise representatives with an opportunity to formally present the long-awaited sequel to audiences and industry figures. The premiere served as an important promotional event for the film, particularly because the sequel had been in development for several years following the release of Mortal Kombat 2021, and represented a significant expansion of the rebooted cinematic universe. The event also highlighted the return of several established characters alongside the introduction of major fan-favorite figures such as Johnny Cage, Katana, Jade, and Shao Kahn. Following its Hollywood premiere, Mortal Kombat 2 was released theatrically in the United States on May 8, 2026, with Warner Bros. Pictures handling its domestic theatrical distribution. The theatrical release positioned the film as a major franchise continuation and gave audiences the opportunity to experience its expanded martial arts action, supernatural mythology, and large-scale battles on the big screen. The release also marked the culmination of a production process that had begun with principal photography in June 2023, experienced a temporary interruption because of the SAG-AFTRA strike, resumed later that year, and concluded in January 2024. The film's theatrical release date underwent several changes during its development and production. Mortal Kombat 2 was originally scheduled to open on October 24, 2025, but that date was subsequently changed as the production and release strategy evolved. A later release date of May 15, 2026 was announced before Warner Bros. Ultimately moved the film forward by 1 week to its final U.S. theatrical release date of May 8, 2026. The changes reflected the logistical and scheduling considerations involved in preparing a large-scale effects-driven franchise film for worldwide theatrical distribution. By settling on the May 8 date, Warner Bros. Positioned the sequel for its eventual 2026 theatrical campaign after several adjustments to the original release timetable. The final release represented an important milestone for the modern Mortal Kombat film franchise. Following the 2021 reboot, the sequel was designed to expand the series substantially through a larger cast, a broader mythology, and a greater emphasis on the interdimensional conflict between Earth's realm and Outworld. The theatrical rollout therefore served not only as the release of a standalone action film but also as the continuation of a larger cinematic universe built around the characters and mythology of the long-running video game series. The combination of its Hollywood premiere on April 27 and its subsequent U.S. theatrical release on May 8, 2026, brought the sequel's expanded interpretation of Mortal Kombat to audiences after years of development, production, and scheduling changes. As of June 25, 2026, Mortal Kombat 2 had grossed approximately $129 million worldwide, consisting of $80 million from the United States and Canada and an additional $50 million from international markets. The film was produced on a reported budget of approximately $80 million, meaning that its worldwide theatrical gross had reached a level roughly equivalent to its production cost before accounting for theater revenue splits, marketing expenses, distribution costs, and other expenditures associated with a major studio release. While the film achieved a substantial worldwide theatrical gross and benefited from the established recognition of the Mortal Kombat brand, its box office performance was more moderate than that of the largest contemporary franchise blockbusters. In the United States and Canada, Mortal Kombat 2 entered theaters alongside The Sheep Detectives and Billy Eilish Hit Me Hard and Soft, The Tour, Live in 3D. Ahead of its opening, industry projections estimated that the film would earn approximately $45 million during its first weekend from around 3,503 theaters. The forecast reflected expectations that the sequel would benefit from the popularity of the Mortal Kombat video game franchise, the established audience of the 2021 film, the return of several principal cast members, and the highly anticipated introduction of characters such as Johnny Cage, Katana, Jade, and Shao Kahn. The film generated a solid start during its opening day. Mortal Kombat 2 earned approximately $17 million on its first day, a figure that included around $5.2 million from Thursday night preview screenings. The preview performance demonstrated considerable initial interest among franchise fans and audiences eager to see the sequel's expanded roster of characters and larger-scale action. Despite the positive early momentum, the film ultimately opened below the upper end of its initial projections, earning approximately $38.5 million during its domestic opening weekend. This result placed it in second position at the weekend box office, finishing behind The Devil Wears Prada 2. The opening established Mortal Kombat 2 as a significant theatrical release but also indicated that its commercial performance would face strong competition from other major studio titles. During its second weekend, the film experienced a substantial decline in ticket sales. It earned approximately $13.4 million, representing a drop of around 65% from its opening weekend. Despite the significant percentage decline, the film remained among the weekend's major theatrical attractions and continued to generate additional domestic revenue. Its second weekend performance, however, indicated that the sequel was experiencing relatively strong front-loading, with a considerable portion of its core fan audience attending during its opening frame. The film's box office decline continued into its third weekend, when it earned approximately $6.1 million in standard weekend grosses. Its performance was somewhat stronger when measured across the extended Memorial Day holiday frame, during which it accumulated approximately $7.6 million over the four-day period. The holiday weekend provided the film with additional theatrical exposure and allowed it to maintain a presence in the domestic marketplace despite increasingly strong competition from other releases. International markets contributed approximately $50 million to the film's worldwide theatrical total by June 25, 2026. Although the international gross was considerably lower than the film's domestic earnings, Overseas markets nevertheless provided an important contribution to the overall performance. The combined domestic and international receipts brought Mortal Kombat 2 to approximately $129 million worldwide, allowing the sequel to surpass its reported $80 million production budget in terms of raw worldwide box office revenue. However, because cinemas retain a portion of ticket sales and because a major studio release also incurs marketing, distribution, and other costs, the worldwide gross alone does not represent the film's net profit.